Hi folks, and welcome to my review of Ancestors Legacy, a real-time strategy game based loosely on events from European history. And if after watching this review you'd like to see more, then check the links down below where you can go and watch my short Let's Play series or go and find a link to it on Xenom Games. However, I will say right away that this isn't a game that I particularly liked, but if you are a die-hard fan of real-time strategy games, it might appeal to you. So, how does Ancestors Legacy play then? Well, it's a real-time strategy. It's the sort of thing that's been done dozens of times before. You build a base, you gather resources, you develop an army, you go and fight for control of other resources across the map, you build your army as big and as tough as it'll go, and then you go and smash your opponent's base somewhere on the other side of the map. And all the while, they're trying to do the same back to you. Now, I mentioned that it was influenced by events in European history. There's 4 nations to choose from. There's Vikings, Anglo-Saxons, Germans and Slavs. But I will say right now, this isn't any sort of historically accurate game. There's campaign modes and there's skirmish modes, there's different units. All they do is add a little bit of flavour to the nation you've picked. They do not, in any way, shape or form, accurately depict the nations that you are fighting as or against. I'll just say that right now in case there's any history fans thinking, oh, Vikings, Anglo-Saxons, yep, love to play this. No, don't. It's just to add a bit of flavour and to differentiate the 4 races in the game. And the history side of things seems pretty flaky when I played through the opening scenario, the tutorial to get into the game, and it was describing the Viking sacking of the Lindisfarne monastery or abbey, and the first time the Vikings raided the British Isles. And it depicted Lindisfarne as some sort of huge medieval city fortress, and I really don't think that the developers have got quite the right idea about that. But that's just the historical aspect of it. That doesn't have any bearing on how the game plays. I just had to point that out right now in case we're any die-hard history fans. If you are a die-hard history fan, you'd probably enjoy Thrones of Britannia, the Total War Saga, which is a little bit more historically accurate. And you can go and check out my review and Let's Plays of that from the links down below as well. Now, I mentioned there's a couple of different game modes. There's a campaign mode and there's a skirmish mode. A skirmish mode is basically just a quick game where you jump onto a map, select your opponents and your own race and your starting map and the conditions for victory, etc., and go off and fight. And that plays like any typical sort of RTS. You start off with a base, you have to send units out to go and gather resources to capture other resource gathering points. You build those resource gathering points up, you harvest the resources, you spend that upgrading your base and your technology and building new armies so you can go and gather more resources, control more points on the map, and of course you have to fight off the incessant raids from the enemy coming in all the time. Now, the resource gathering does work a little bit differently in this. It's based around villages. Now, a little village has 1 or more resource points in it. It might be wood, food or iron. And basically when you capture a village, then you can build the resource gathering nodes associated to that village. You don't get to place buildings, however. You just get to basically upgrade that aspect of the village and it plonks the building down like a woodcutter's camp where it thinks it needs to go. It's preset in the locations. There's no variation from map to map. And you can't choose where that village goes, which would have been more interesting. Same with your upgrading defences. You can build some archery towers to help fend off the enemy when they come and try and raid it. But basically for each village on the map, these are your resource gathering points. All the building locations are set in stone. So it kind of simplifies the things if you don't like the base building aspect of it. Personally, I think the base building aspect of these games adds something more to do and more interest to it. So I'm a little bit disappointed. It's all set in stone, a little bit dull. So anyway, once you've got your village under control and your resource points built, they start bringing in resources, and you use these resources typically for either upgrading units or buying new ones or building new buildings somewhere else. And like all other RTSs, the objective is simply just outproduce your opponents on a map so you can build a bigger, stronger army or reinforce it faster when it gets knocked down, and eventually take over their base and wipe them out. There's a couple of variations on this in the skirmish modes, like domination mode, where you can dominate just by producing more resources, but it's that general sort of gameplay. Harvest the resources, build the army, trash the enemy's bases. Now I will say that I found the difficulty levels way out of whack on these skirmish modes, and I might be able to put this down to my own ineptitude at the game or lack of experience, but when playing through on medium level against an AI, I found that they had, well, it felt like they had some sort of production bonus. They could produce units way faster than I could and reinforce them, and no matter how many times I played and whichever strategies I used, I could not keep up with the enemy's production rate. Now maybe that's just because I'm crap at the game, and I'll perfectly happily accept that. So I switched the difficulty down, and that was too easy, so I couldn't find a happy level to play at, because I like a challenge from a game, but I don't like getting stomped before I can even expand across the map, and I can't go and take any other villages to have a chance of winning the battle. But I don't like it being so easy that it's just a walkover either. And I found that the difficulty levels between easy and medium just weren't quite balanced right. But that might just be me. Anyway, one very good thing about the skirmish modes is that they do have the option for player versus player and co-op multiplayer as well. So you could set you and a buddy up, for example, on one allied side against 2 enemy AI controlled nations. So it does have that feature in. That is a very good feature. It's great for playing with family and friends and stuff. Something I like. Or if you're competitive, you can go and find matches and play against other players. Whatever you prefer, multiplayer wise, this does cater for it in the skirmish mode, which is pretty nice. The campaign mode is a little bit different. There's still an element of gathering resources and stuff about it, but each nation has, well, it's got capacity for 2 main character storylines, and not all the nations have them fully complete at the moment. The Vikings do have 2, and the Saxons have 2, and the Slavs and the Germans I think only have 1 at the time of making this review, but I think the idea is that they're going to be patched in and they are coming soon. Basically, a storyline is just a series of missions where you follow one particular character from that nation's past, Olaf, Bloodbeard, or whatever he's called in the case of the Vikings, and you follow the story through a series of maps. Now, it's not so much about base building, especially in the early part of these story mode campaigns. It's more sort of just do an objective, do the next objective, do the next objective, finish the map, on to the next one. And the objectives will be something like gather 100 food, go and find this camp and rescue this unit, go over to this side of the map and burn this village, and then whatever. It basically, it walks you through it one step at a time. You can't deviate from the plan. You have to do the objectives in order. It's kind of interesting, the campaign mode, because I got bored very quickly of the skirmish mode against AI opponents. Campaign mode, a bit of a story, it kind of interests you a little bit more, but the fact that it is so rigid means there's very little replayability in that, and once you've played through the stories for each character, you're probably not going to want to play through them again because there won't be any variation. You can't do anything differently. You can't use different tactics to get through it. So it's a one-off playthrough and then it's done. And after that, I guess the idea is that you'll go and play the skirmish mode. However, I tend to get very bored of those pretty quickly because they are just so repetitive. Build a base, gather the resources, upgrade your army, fight off the incessant AI attacks as they come into raid your village, push across the map, gather the resources, build your army, smash the opponent's base, and repeat ad infinitum. If you're a big fan of real-time strategy games with that sort of gameplay, then this does it probably as well as any other, but if you're like me and you've seen this thing a dozen times before, some do it better, some do it worse, some have better flavour stories, well, this doesn't really appeal to me all that much, I have to say. So let's talk a little bit about the units that you come in the game. Each side has some pretty base units like spearmen and sword and shieldsmen. They're basic sort of infantry, and you also get scouts, which are light cavalry, very good for running around the map, very good for charging into the flanks of enemy units with. And then each race also has some flavour units, like the Vikings get berserkers, the Saxons I think start with some slingers, and I think they get huskars later on. And the Germans, I think, get some knights, panzer knights, and the Slavs, I think they have mounted archers. The thing is, it sounds like the scope for a lot of different units, but here's the thing, there really isn't, because when you're playing these games, and you're limited to 10 squads, smallish squads as well, so it's not like you're going to be gathering a massive army, and some units are more useful than others. To be honest, I find the differences in name don't make a huge lot of difference to the outcome of the battle. Slingers and archers, of course, are both ranged units, and like a lot of other games of this type, they have the huge flaw, the thing that really annoys me, they have friendly fire. Now that isn't a problem, it's a fair thing in most games, but the trouble is you can't turn on a button that says stop shooting at a target if it's going to also inflict friendly fire. So you start shooting at a mob of enemy spearmen come rushing in, they clash with your swordsmen, and then you have to micromanage the archers and slingers or whatever, tell them to stop firing, so otherwise they'll happily shoot into the melee and shoot your own guys in the back. And I hate that in real-time strategy games and any sort of war games. Friendly fire itself isn't a problem, but the fact that your troops are so stupid that they'll carry on shooting at the enemy target, scything down waves of their own men in the process. There should just be a little option that you tick that says, don't do archery bollocks if it's going to kill your own men. That's all it needs in a game. A little button that you can tick to avoid friendly fire. And they'll sit there like lemons, but that's better than shooting your own men, right? Anyway, sorry, rant over. That's something that always annoys me with these games. It was the same in loads of the Total War games. It's not the problem unique to this. I just don't understand why developers just can't put that in as a feature. So when you get into combat, obviously your men will take wounds, and if they take enough wounds, you'll lose a man out of the squad. But that doesn't mean that the squad is permanently weakened. If the troops are just wounded, for example, you've got 2 or 3 men, their health condition is red and yellow, it means they've taken a couple of wounds, well, you can pull the squad back and put them into healing modes, where they sit down, have a few beers, and they get the health back and they're topped up to full health in no time whatsoever. Or if you've lost a couple of men, they're dead out of the unit is below strength, you can pull it back to the nearest recruiting centre, typically your nearest village or town centre, and you can click a button there and they'll replenish the missing warriors. They've also got a nice feature that your squads build up experience and they level up, and you can improve their offense, their defense, their speed. It varies depending on what type of squad they are. It's a nice feature, and that also brings me on to another feature. They've got the retreat button. Now this isn't new to this game. I think I saw it in Company of Heroes 2, which I used to play, which is a similar sort of theme to this, except set in World War II. You can retreat a squad out of combat if they are getting their arses handed to them, or if you think you're about to lose them. That's very good because they retain the experience as long as they don't get wiped out. So you can retreat them out of combat, they run off, the enemy can't catch them unless they're on horses or they've got ranged units to pepper them off. You can replenish that squad back at base, and it doesn't lose the experience that you would lose by having them wiped out and having to recruit a new squad. So, interesting feature. You can build up an army full of veterans. So that's more or less how the game works. I'm sure you've got the idea from watching the footage in the background, and as I said, you've probably seen this before on other real-time strategy games. So do I think it's any good? Well, as a real-time strategy game goes, it's fine. There's a couple of issues with it, but otherwise I find them quite dull. I find them very repetitive, and that is basically all there is to the game. It's once you played through the story campaigns, which aren't that exciting, I have to say, especially when you realise that the historical accuracy is way off, then you're just left with the skirmish game, and unless you've got people to play with, either co-op or against, you're probably going to get tired of that pretty quick. Well, at least I did. But having said that, I mean, it works, it's fine, it's all good, and it does fill the role of a real-time strategy game. It doesn't have any particular faults. There's a few things about the game that they could have done better, like in the campaign mode, there's various story objectives that you have to fulfill, and some of them involve the character, who, by the way, most of the time is a killing machine that you can wade into combat with, much stronger than a single squad of soldiers. But sometimes these characters have to sneak into enemy camps in disguise, and the few times I've tried to do that in 2 different story campaigns, after you put the disguise on, you walk past the guards and they just shoot you anyway. So that was fun, and again, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but it didn't seem to work very well in that respect. So that could definitely been done better. I've mentioned the friendly fire thing with archers. That is just so annoying and leads to micromanagement hell of missile troops, or something which I could well do without. And as I said, the difficulty levels between easy and medium seem way out of whack. I don't even know what hard difficulty would look like, because the medium on the skirmish mode seemed ridiculous, and it did feel like the AI was cheating. I might be wrong, I might be completely wrong, but it did not feel like they should be able to produce the number of units in the time they had that they did. And I know a lot of RTS games do this to increase the level of difficulty, but at the same time it doesn't really lead to much more interesting gameplay, in my opinion, and the easy mode was just too easy. It It is a bit disappointing that you can't place the buildings individually, but at the same time, that stops people doing anything too cheesy in multiplayer, trying to block off bridges and stuff by building whatever in the way. Maybe I should mention that your troops in this can actually dig traps, pit traps and spiked pit traps, which is an interesting feature. So you can just bung a big trap on the opposite side of a bridge and let the enemy troops run right into it. That's kind of cool. But overall, your forces, I feel, are far too limited both in size and scope. The limited unit types and the repetitive gameplay doesn't really make this a game that I'd want to play any longer than I already have done. Now, I don't want to leave on a negative, so there are a couple of good points that I will mention. There's the multiplayer, either PvP or, my preference, co-op for these sort of things. And the other thing, which is a nice feature, you can actually zoom right in on the combat and get an action cam. All the UI disappears off the screen, and you can actually see your soldiers really slugging it out with quite nasty looking axe swings and blood and gore everywhere. That's a cool feature. The trouble is, when you zoomed in like that, you kind of miss what else is going on and you can't control your units, but it is pretty cool just to have a look at. So overall, this is a very standard RTS or real-time strategy game. It doesn't do anything particularly new and exciting. It definitely is not historically accurate, so don't buy into the game thinking you're going to be playing the campaigns of yesteryear that built Europe. It's just a bit of fluff and flavour, and to differentiate the races, it isn't historically accurate. It's just historically inspired, I think, is the correct way to put it. But overall, it's not a game for me. However, if you do like this sort of thing, then there's links down below where you can pick it up at a good price from Zenom Games. And also, if you'd like to see a bit more gameplay and my experience of it, then you can check out my Let's Play series over on the second channel. It's only a short series. I didn't play it for very long before I think I sussed it out, but it's there if you'd like to have a look. Alright folks, that's it for my review of Ancestors Legacy. Do check out the links down below, and I hope you find the video useful, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button if you'd like to be informed of all my new reviews as and when they're released. Thanks again folks, and I'll catch you again in the next one.